The blast that was meant to open a silver seam buried 11 men behind 40 feet of broken rock. By midnight, every rescue crew in Coldwater had failed to clear more than a few yards. The main tunnel groaned each time a shovel struck stone, and dust drifted from the roof like gray snow. Then Ada Mercer arrived with the old roan mule the mine had given her instead of her husband's unpaid wages. Copper had one split ear, a scarred left foreleg, and a reputation for stopping whenever men demanded speed. Mine Superintendent Silas Keene called the animal useless and ordered Ada to keep him away from the rescue. Copper sniffed the timbered entrance, backed away, and pulled Ada toward a weed-covered ravine behind the stamp mill. Ada looked at Silas and said, "He is not refusing the mine, he is refusing your way into it." Before sunrise, the mule everyone mocked would find the only path that still carried air to the trapped men. But 6 months earlier, Ada would have laughed at anyone who told her she would trust copper with a human life. Coldwater, Colorado, survived on one narrow silver vein and the stubborn people who worked above and below it. Ada had arrived there with her husband Eli in the spring of 1888. Eli framed mine tunnels, repaired ore chutes, and understood timber well enough to hear trouble before others saw it. Ada kept a small laundry behind their cabin and learned the mine from the stories Eli brought home each night. He drew tunnel turns on scraps of flour paper while she mended his shirts beside the stove. Ada learned which drifts stayed dry, which ladders leaned, and which rock made Eli lower his voice. She never expected that knowledge to become the most valuable thing he left her. In late autumn, a roof fall killed Eli and another carpenter near the mine's old northern workings. The company called the accident sudden, unavoidable, and expensive enough without paying questions to the dead. Ada received Eli's coat, his lunch tin, and a ledger showing 6 weeks of wages still owed. Silas Keene promised payment after the next shipment of silver reached Denver. The shipment left, another followed, and the money never crossed Ada's table. By January, the grocer wanted cash, the landlord wanted rent, and Winter wanted more firewood than she could buy. Ada sold Eli's spare boots before she sold the brass pocket watch his father had carried during the war. She also stopped asking Silas politely. One frozen morning, Ada entered the mine office and placed the unpaid ledger on his desk. Silas had broad shoulders, a black mustache, and the tired eyes of a man always calculating another week of payroll. He said the mine had cash for powder, food, and wages for men still producing ore. Ada answered that dead men had already produced the ore he was selling. Silas stared at the ledger longer than he stared at her. Finally, he offered her a mule from the company stable as partial settlement. Ada asked whether the mule was worth 6 weeks of a carpenter's wages. Silas said, "Not if you ask the men who have tried to work him." The stable hands heard about the bargain before Ada reached the barn. They gathered along the rail with the uncomfortable interest people show when an insult has become public entertainment. Copper stood in the last stall, a dark roan mule with a white muzzle and a ragged split in his right ear. A pale scar crossed his left foreleg, and one rear shoe had been worn thinner than the others. He was not small, weak, or old enough to explain why the mine wanted him gone. His problem was simpler and more expensive. Copper stopped. He stopped before steep grades, loose rock, fresh blasting, dark puddles, narrow bridges, and sometimes for reasons no rider understood. Pull harder, and he planted his feet. Strike him, and he sat back against the harness until leather or temper gave way first. The miners called him Preacher because every halt seemed to come with a silent opinion. Eli had called him Copper, and Ada noticed that detail immediately. An older stableman named Jonah Pike said Eli had used copper for timber runs in the northern drift. Ada asked why the mule no longer worked underground. Jonah rubbed his gray beard and answered, "Because men hate being corrected by something that cannot explain itself." Silas had already signed the animal over, so Ada took the lead rope and walked Copper home. Halfway to her cabin, he stopped in the middle of the road. Ada pulled once, remembered the laughing stable hands, and pulled harder. Copper lowered his head and refused to move. Ada stepped off the road to pass him and sank to her ankle through a crust of snow. Beneath the white surface, runoff had hollowed a trench beside the wagon track. Copper had stopped where the frozen edge was beginning to break. Ada led him 6 feet uphill, and the mule walked on without argument. She told herself the stop had been luck. Copper gave her 3 more reasons to doubt that conclusion before the week ended. He refused a footbridge moments before Ada noticed one support had split beneath the ice. He stopped beside a woodpile until she found a rusted nail buried under the snow in his path. He also refused a bucket from the public trough. and drank from a clean spring farther uphill. The next morning, the trough smelled of a dead rat trapped beneath its cover. Ada did not decide Copper was wise. She decided he noticed things before she did. That distinction was practical enough to matter. She built a crude drag sled from fence boards and began hauling firewood from the lower slopes. Copper could pull twice what Ada could carry, which turned Silas's insult into heat for her stove. He moved slowly on level ground and became even slower whenever the trail changed beneath his feet. Ada learned to stop pulling when he stopped walking. She would wait, watch his ears, study the ground, and choose a different line if he still refused. Some days Copper resumed after a few breaths, as though the problem had passed. Other days he turned his entire body and insisted on another route. Ada discovered that arguing with him usually cost more time than listening. Townspeople began hiring her to haul flour, coal, laundry water, and broken furniture too heavy for handcarts. Copper made those jobs possible, though he refused to perform them at anyone else's preferred speed. Children started waiting near the store, because the stern-looking mule accepted carrot ends with ridiculous gentleness. Ada pretended not to notice when Copper searched her coat pocket for one after every delivery. By February, she had paid the grocer and kept Eli's watch. That alone made Copper more valuable than Silas had intended. The first real test came after a snowstorm covered the wagon road to the upper cabins. A miner's wife, named Ruth Bell, needed a sack of flour and medicine for her feverish daughter. The usual road crossed a narrow shelf above a frozen creek. Ada loaded Copper lightly and started before sunrise. At the shelf, Copper froze so abruptly that the sled bumped his heels. Ada saw nothing except wind-packed snow and the dark pines below. She tested the surface with a shovel handle. The crust held near her boots, then collapsed where the road curved around the cliff. A slab of snow and loose earth had broken away beneath the white surface. One more step could have taken Mule, sled, and Ada into the creek bed below. Copper backed 3 steps and turned toward an old logging trail buried between the trees. Ada had never used it, but Eli once mentioned that it rejoined the upper road near a charcoal pit. She let Copper choose the entrance. The logging trail added nearly an hour, but kept solid ground beneath them. Ruth's daughter received the medicine before noon. On the return trip, Ada found Silas's road crew staring at the broken shelf. Jonah Pike stood among them and asked how she had crossed before the collapse was visible. Ada nodded toward Copper and said, "I did not." Jonah smiled as though he had been waiting for her to understand something. He told her Copper had survived a tunnel crush 3 years earlier by refusing to enter a newly blasted drift. 2 men forced another mule past him and found fresh cracks running through the ceiling timbers. After that, Eli began watching Copper whenever the animal stopped underground. The mule sometimes reacted to loosened stone, fresh powder smoke, standing water, or a change in air movement. Jonah said no one knew exactly which warning Copper noticed each time. Eli had believed the reason mattered less than the pattern. Ada asked why Silas had kept using an animal he considered unreliable. Jonah answered that a good mule cost money, and pride often cost men nothing until later. That evening, Ada found a faint scar under Copper's collar, where old harness leather had once rubbed him raw. She adjusted the padding and shortened one strap to keep pressure off his left shoulder. Copper stood perfectly still while she worked. When she finished, he touched his white muzzle to the sleeve of Eli's old brown coat. Ada realized the mule knew the coat smell better than most people in town knew her grief. She gave him the carrot she had been saving for breakfast. Winter loosened slowly, and the mine began preparing for deeper work in the northern vein. Silver prices were falling, investors were impatient, and Coldwater depended on the mine for nearly every paid job. Silas Keene needed one rich shipment before summer, or the owners planned to cut the workforce in half. He chose to reopen the North Crown Drift, a section abandoned after repeated roof movement. Jonah objected because the old timber sets had spent years swelling, drying, and shifting under pressure. Silas answered that the dangerous section would be replaced before miners entered beyond it. Ada heard the argument while delivering clean shirts to the bunkhouse. The words North Crown made her remember a flower paper map Eli had once drawn beside their stove. She searched Eli's trunk that night and found the old scrap folded inside a wool glove. The drawing was crude, but Ada recognized the main shaft, the North Crown, and a narrow line above it. Eli had labeled that upper line Old Air Cut and marked its western end with a small cross. Ada remembered asking why anyone would dig a tunnel too small for ore carts. Eli had said some passages existed only so men could breathe where they worked. The map showed the air cut reaching a ravine behind the stamp mill before turning toward North Crown. Ada had walked that ravine dozens of times and never seen a mine opening there. The next morning, she took Copper and followed the dry wash uphill. Snow still filled the shaded ground, while meltwater ran brown beneath the willows. Copper moved willingly until they reached a slope covered in scrub oak and old mine waste. Then he stopped and stared at the hillside. Ada searched the brush and found 3 squared timbers almost buried beneath a slide of stone. One timber carried a faded streak of blue paint, matching a mark on Eli's map. The old air cut had not vanished. Its entrance had simply been covered by years of runoff. Ada cleared enough loose dirt to expose a black gap no wider than her shoulders. Cool air touched her cheek from inside. Copper raised his head, breathed toward the opening, and stepped closer without being asked. Ada did not enter, because the timbers around the portal had rotted almost to soil. Instead, she marked the place with 3 stones and returned to town. Jonah examined Eli's map behind the stable door, where curious miners would not gather. He confirmed that the air cut once connected the ravine to a raise above North Crown. He also said the mine had stopped maintaining it after a newer ventilation route opened from the main shaft. Ada asked whether the old cut could still reach the northern workings. Jonah said, "If the middle has not fallen, maybe. If it has, that paper is only memory." Ada wanted to show Silas immediately, but Jonah told her to first see what the superintendent was already repairing. 2 days later, Silas reopened the first section of North Crown for timber crews. He replaced cracked posts, doubled caps beneath the worst roof, and ordered fresh bracing around the first turn. The work was not careless, which made Ada's fear harder to dismiss and harder to prove. Silas was risking men, but he was also spending money to reduce the risk. Coldwater needed him to be right. Ada offered to haul replacement timbers with Copper from the yard to the mine mouth. Silas accepted because her rate was lower than bringing another team from the valley. For 3 days, Copper carried timber without trouble and stopped only at loose stones along the approach. On the 4th day, Jonah asked Ada to bring a bundle just inside the first tunnel set. Copper entered the portal beneath hanging oil lamps and the steady knock of hammers. His ears moved constantly as wagon wheels, picks, and voices echoed through the mountain. He passed the first junction, then stopped 20 yards before the reopened northern turn. Ada waited. Copper sniffed once, lifted his muzzle, and backed until the timber load touched the wall. A young miner laughed and said the famous Mule had finally found darkness too frightening. Ada asked everyone to be quiet for 10 seconds. In the silence, a faint tapping came from overhead, followed by grains of rock striking the timber cap. Jonah ordered the men back before Silas could answer. Minutes later, a slab of stone broke from the roof and smashed across the empty track ahead of Copper. It was not a major collapse, but it would have crushed the mule's load and anyone walking beside it. Silas examined the broken rock and blamed an unseen seam opened by winter frost. Ada said Copper had heard or felt the warning before any of them. Silas replied that he would trust a carpenter's inspection before an animal's nerves. Jonah quietly answered, Eli used both. No one laughed at Copper when Ada led him back into daylight. If you enjoy frontier stories where overlooked judgment matters more than reputation, subscribe and stay with Ada and Copper. That evening, Jonah came to Ada's cabin carrying a dented tin box that had belonged to Eli. He said he should have delivered it after the funeral but had been ashamed of what was inside. The box held carpenter's chalk, 2 worn measuring strings, and several folded inspection notes. One note was dated 4 days before Eli died. Eli had written that the North Crown roof was loading unevenly beyond the old raise. He recommended closing the drift until new support could be set from solid ground backward. At the bottom, Silas had written one sentence in pencil. The sentence said, "Hold until Monday." We cannot lose another shipment. Eli died on Saturday. Ada read the note twice before asking Jonah why Silas still had his office and his teeth. Jonah said Eli returned voluntarily because 2 younger carpenters had already gone in to brace the section. He had tried to pull them back after the roof started moving. One carpenter escaped. Eli and the other man did not. Silas had not ordered Eli to die, but he had ordered dangerous work to continue. Jonah admitted he said nothing, because closing the mine in winter could have emptied Coldwater before spring. Ada folded the note and placed it beside Eli's watch. For the first time since the funeral, grief gave way to something colder and more useful. She went to Silas before sunrise. He did not deny the pencil sentence. Silas said the mine had been one missed shipment from losing credit for food, powder, and payroll. He had believed fresh braces would hold until the vein paid for a full repair. Ada asked whether he still believed that after burying her husband. Silas looked toward the window and said, "I believe a closed mine buries a whole town more slowly." Ada understood the fear behind his decision and hated the decision anyway. She placed Eli's map beside the inspection note and showed him the old air cut. Silas recognized it, but said the passage had been abandoned for years and might already be blocked. Ada told him cold air still moved through the ravine entrance. She asked him to clear and inspect the cut before sending miners deeper into North Crown. Silas calculated men, timber, lost shifts, and a shipment already promised to the railhead. He agreed to inspect the main ventilation route again, but refused to spend a crew on the old cut. Ada said one unused escape could be worth more than one extra ore car. Silas answered, "Not if the escape is a hole full of fallen mountain." The argument ended with both of them believing the other understood the danger and valued it incorrectly. Ada stopped hauling mine timber the next day. She took delivery work instead and kept copper above ground. Still, every time blasting rolled beneath Coldwater, the mule lifted his head toward North Crown. Ada began clearing the ravine entrance to the old air cut by herself. She moved loose rock with a shovel, replaced one rotten portal post, and hauled debris out with copper. Jonah helped after his shift, though he made Ada promise not to enter beyond the first supported section. The work exposed enough of the passage to reveal a steady breath of cool air from deeper inside. Copper would stand at the portal, with his ears forward, calm in a place he supposedly feared. Ada began to suspect he had traveled the air cut before it was abandoned. Jonah confirmed that Eli once used copper to carry short timbers through its wider western section. The mule had not seen that passage for nearly 4 years. Ada wondered what he might remember that the men had forgotten. Spring reached Coldwater in sudden warm days that sent snowmelt down every ravine. Water seeped into old workings, swelled timber, and made the mine sound different after dark. Silas increased pumping and pushed the North Crown crews toward the rich vein shown in the assay samples. The first ore from the reopened drift was better than anyone had hoped. Men who had worried about the roof began talking about new boots, paid debts, and roofs for their own cabins. Coldwater's fear changed direction as soon as silver appeared in the carts. Ada became the difficult widow, standing between hungry families and the first good news in months. Even Ruth Bell, whose daughter Ada had helped, asked whether Silas might finally have made the drift safe. Ada said she hoped he had. Hope did not make her stop clearing the old air cut. A week later, the mine announced an overnight blast to open the strongest section of the vein. 11 men would remain below after the blast to inspect, brace, and begin loading before morning. Jonah was assigned to the timber crew. So was 19-year-old Ben Calder, the carpenter who had escaped the collapse that killed Eli. Ben had avoided Ada for months because surviving beside Eli made every conversation feel like theft. On the evening of the blast, he finally stopped beside Copper's shed. Ben said Eli had shoved him towards solid ground before the roof came down. He had never thanked Ada because he did not know how to thank the widow of the man who took his place. Ada told him gratitude belonged to Eli, not to her. Then she made Ben promise to leave North Crown if the roof began talking. Ben tried to smile and said, "Jonah says every roof talks if you are scared enough." Ada answered, "Then be scared enough to listen." Copper pressed his muzzle against Ben's shoulder as the young carpenter turned toward the mine. Ben scratched the mule's split ear and said he would be back before breakfast. The first blast sounded at 11 that night and rolled under the town like distant thunder. Ada was awake, mending a harness strap beside the stove while Copper stood in the shed behind her cabin. A second sound followed the blast nearly a minute later. It was deeper, longer, and ended with every cup on Ada's shelf trembling at once. Copper struck his stall door with his chest and began braying toward the mine. The town bell rang before Ada reached the road. Men ran uphill carrying lanterns, shovels, pry bars, blankets, and the frightened silence of people expecting names. At the mine mouth, smoke drifted from the main tunnel, and a broken ore car lay on its side. The blast had opened the silver seam and shaken loose a hidden fault behind the new timber sets. North Crown collapsed at 2 points, trapping all 11 men beyond the second fall. The main ventilation duct had been crushed with the track. A faint draft still moved through the rubble, but no one knew how long it would last. Silas organized 2 digging crews and ordered them to attack the first fall from the main tunnel. Ada asked whether anyone had checked the old air cut. Silas said the main route was shorter and every minute mattered. The first rescue crew entered with fresh posts and began clearing loose stone beneath the damaged roof. 20 minutes later, they came back carrying a man with a broken wrist after another timber cap shifted. The mountain was still settling around the direct route. Ada brought Copper from the edge of the crowd and walked him toward the main portal. The mule reached the timbered entrance, smelled the air, and backed so hard the lead rope tightened in Ada's hand. Silas called the animal useless and told Ada not to turn a rescue into a superstition. Copper pulled sideways, away from the portal, and faced the ravine behind the stamp mill. That was when Ada said, "He is not refusing the mine. He is refusing your way into it." Silas looked at the unstable tunnel, then at Eli's widow holding the map he had once ignored. He ordered one digging crew to follow Ada. The ravine portal was already half cleared from the work Ada and Jonah had done during the previous weeks. Men widened the opening while Copper dragged baskets of loose rock down the slope. He worked without hesitation, leaning into the harness each time Ada asked. Within an hour, the old air cut stood open enough for two men to enter side by side. A lantern flame bent gently inward, proving air still traveled through the mountain. Silas wanted a small crew to go first and leave Ada outside. Ada reminded him that she had Eli's map, and Copper knew the passage better than any living miner. Silas said Copper had not worked there in years. Ada answered, "Neither has your map." Silas took a lantern, Jonah's spare hammer, and finally agreed. Ada entered first with Copper behind her and two experienced miners following Silas. The air cut was low, damp, and lined with timber blackened by age. Water dripped from the roof, but the floor remained firm beneath Copper's careful steps. Every few yards, Ada stopped long enough to listen before asking him forward again. Copper never needed the second request. After 200 yards, the passage reached a fork that did not appear on Eli's flower paper map. The left branch descended toward North Crown and carried old rail marks in the floor. The right branch climbed slightly and looked narrower, older, and nearly forgotten. Silas chose the left because it pointed directly toward the trapped men. Copper refused to follow. Ada gave him time, but the mule backed from the left branch and pressed his shoulder toward the right. Silas said they could not let an animal add hundreds of yards to a rescue. Ada handed him the lantern and told him to inspect 10 yards of the left branch before deciding. Silas and one miner stepped into the descent, while Ada held Copper at the fork. They had gone less than 30 feet when a dry cracking sound moved through the roof ahead. Silas froze. A timber post farther down split lengthwise without anyone touching it. The men returned slowly, and a shower of stone followed them into the fork. Silas looked at Copper and said nothing. Ada turned into the right branch. Copper followed immediately. The forgotten branch climbed through dry rock until the dripping stopped and the air became noticeably cooler. Ada felt the draft against the damp hair near her forehead. Somewhere ahead, metal struck stone 3 times. Everyone stopped breathing long enough to hear it again. 3 slow strikes answered from beyond the darkness. The trapped men were alive. Silas shouted through the passage and received a faint voice from below an old timbered raise. North Crown lay beneath them, separated by a vertical opening partly clogged with broken boards and rock. The miners had found the bottom of that raise after the collapse blocked both ends of their drift. Jonah called up that Ben had a badly injured ankle, and one man was struggling to breathe after inhaling dust. Their lamps were burning low because the broken ventilation no longer pulled enough fresh air through North Crown. The old air cut was carrying the only steady draft left near them. Ada realized Copper had not merely found a safer road, he had found the road that still breathed. The rescue crew cleared the top of the raise, while Silas sent a runner back for rope, water, and blankets. Copper carried the runner's empty gear back toward daylight, saving the man from dragging it through the low passage. When he returned, the mule brought 2 coils of rope, a water bag, and a folded canvas sling. Ada tied the first water bag to the rope and lowered it through the opening. Jonah's voice rose from below, rough with dust but steady enough to count all 11 men again. The raise was too steep and damaged for injured miners to climb safely without support. Silas proposed lowering a man to widen the lower opening and secure each miner into the sling. Ada said the rope team would exhaust itself before lifting 11 adults through the incline. She looked at Copper's harness and remembered the wood sled that had paid her winter debts. The old air cut sloped gently toward the ravine, giving them room to use the mule as moving power. They ran the rescue rope around a sound timber post, making a simple change of direction above the raise. The free end ran back through the tunnel to Copper's breast collar. Ada would walk him toward daylight while the rope lifted each miner upward through the damaged rays. Silas inspected every knot himself and then climbed down to secure the first injured man. Ben Calder came up first, with his ankle wrapped between two short boards. Ada asked Copper forward, and the mule leaned into the harness with the same patient force he used on firewood. The rope tightened, the sling rose, and Ben appeared slowly through the broken timbers above North Crown. He was pale with pain but conscious enough to grab Ada's sleeve when she knelt beside him. Ben whispered, "Eli was right about the old air cut." Ada answered, "Then help me prove him right 11 times." Copper pulled again for the miner with the damaged lungs, then again for the next man. Between lifts, Ada rested him, loosened the collar, and offered water from her hand. The mule's sides darkened with sweat, but he stepped forward each time the rope became heavy. 6 men reached the air cut before a hard jolt shook the timber post above the rays. Dust poured from a crack along the ceiling, and Copper stopped before Ada could give the next command. Silas, still below, shouted that 5 men remained. One rescuer urged Ada to move the mule before the roof settled farther. Copper planted all 4 feet and stared at the timber carrying the rescue rope. Ada followed his gaze and saw the post shifting where its base met loose stone. Another heavy pull could tear it free and drop the sling back into North Crown. Ada stopped the rescue. The trapped men below protested until Silas understood what Copper had noticed. He told Ada to move the rope to a second timber set farther up the passage. That meant dragging the line around a bend and lifting at a worse angle. It also meant losing precious minutes while the lamps below weakened. Ada chose the slower setup because a fast rescue that failed halfway was not a rescue. Copper backed willingly once the load left the damaged post. The first timber shifted another inch before the new rope was ready. No one questioned the mule again. Ada tested the new anchor with a sack of rock before allowing another man into the sling. The 7th miner rose safely, followed by the 8th and 9th. Each pull shortened Copper's stride, but none made him refuse. Jonah came up 10th with blood dried along one temple, and Eli's old hammer still tucked through his belt. He collapsed beside Ada and immediately asked whether Silas was moving. Silas remained below alone, securing the sling around himself while stone clicked from the damaged rays. Ada called down that the rope was ready. Silas answered, "Then do not waste the good mule on a bad superintendent." Ada tightened Copper's collar and said, "Eli did not choose who deserved solid ground, and neither will I." She asked Copper forward one last time. The mule leaned into the harness until his hooves scraped sparks from a buried strip of rail. The rope groaned around the sound timber, and Silas rose inch by inch through the broken rays. Halfway up, the abandoned anchor behind them tore free and crashed into North Crown. The roof above the old position dropped seconds later in a burst of dust and splintered wood. Had Ada ignored Copper, the last 5 lifts would have been tied to that collapse. Silas reached the air cut coughing, bruised, and alive. Ada released the harness before Copper could take another step. The mule lowered his head and stood with both front legs trembling from effort. Silas knelt beside him and rested one dusty hand against the white muzzle he had called useless. He said, "Eli taught you better than I listened." Copper searched his coat for a carrot. Ada laughed for the first time that night and gave the mule one from her own pocket. All 11 trapped men reached the ravine before dawn, and none had to return through the unstable main tunnel. Ben's ankle healed crooked enough to change his walk, but not enough to end his work as a carpenter. The miner who struggled to breathe spent 2 weeks above ground and later returned on shorter shifts. North Crown remained closed, while crews rebuilt the damaged section from solid rock and reopened the old air cut completely. Silas sent Eli's inspection note to the owners with a written statement admitting he had delayed the closure. He lost his position before summer and stayed in Coldwater long enough to help finish the new escape route. The company finally paid Ada Eli's missing wages and added compensation it should have offered after the accident. Ada used part of the money to buy her cabin and the narrow lot beside it. She used another part to build Copper a proper stable with a dry floor and a wide door. She kept the hauling business because freedom earned by work felt better than money delivered by apology. Jonah retired from underground work that autumn and spent his mornings repairing harness for Ada beside the new stable. Ben became the mine's youngest timber foreman 3 years later and refused every schedule that asked wood to hurry against stone. Copper never became faster, more obedient, or easier for impatient people to understand. He still stopped at bad footing, strange air, loose bridges, and sometimes at things Ada could not identify. The difference was that Coldwater stopped calling every hesitation stubbornness. On the frontier, strength was often measured by what could pull hardest, climb fastest, or obey without question. Copper offered a harder lesson. Experience may look like resistance when it notices a danger that confidence has missed. Ada learned that listening did not mean surrendering judgment. It meant gathering one more piece of truth before choosing. That lesson reaches farther than any mind, because people also get labeled difficult when they refuse a path everyone else accepts. Sometimes caution is fear, but sometimes it is memory doing useful work. And wisdom begins by learning the difference. Would you have trusted Copper and taken the forgotten air cut? Or kept digging the shorter road through the main tunnel? Share your answer in the comments. And if Ada and Copper stayed with you, like the video and subscribe for another Frontier story.